morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you're watching this. Welcome to Grace Healing. My name is Andreas, and I would like to welcome Larry in my virtual studio.
Welcome and good morning, and good afternoon, good evening.
How are you doing today, Larry?
I am great, wonderful.
At the beginning of the week, we were chatting about a theme, and we came up with listening, that we're going to explore listening. What is listening today? There's a Greek philosopher that once said, there's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen more than we speak, right?
Yes.
So that's the mechanical part of it. And we're not aiming here to talk about how can we improve our communication style. That's not the point. I think we want to go deeper with what listening means spiritually as well. You know, I find that many people nowadays are looking for new practices of spirituality, new Christian practices of spiritualities, and find ways how they can listen to God and hear God, right? So what, in your opinion, Larry, what is the relationship of spirituality and listening, and how does this relationship fit into your understanding of communication?
Well, I have to say first off that I have to let go of any opinion because what I've witnessed is it's more about the personal experience of the individual. So my opinion might not reflect how somebody else is going to hear God. Because in my experience, now I've been blessed to serve thousands of people and see thousands of people healed, but I don't hear God in a spoken word. I hear people all the time that say, oh, I heard God tell me to do this, or God told me to do that, or God said this to me. Honestly, I've never had that experience except for when I was at one time when I was dead and buried in the ground by somebody, and another time when I was being thrashed about in white water, and another time when I was near drowning in a commercial scuba diving situation. But I didn't even hear it as a audible sense of words. It was an absolute knowing that compelled me. It was this knowing that somehow I felt in me, it translated into words in my mind, but it came as an absolute knowing of what to do. So it's not like the voice coming from on high saying, Larry, do this. It's this just an absolute clarity of knowing, without question, without reservation, absolute focus to move in this direction, or to move in this direction, or to do this thing. And it comes with a clarity, and it comes with a knowing that it aligns with divine nature. I don't have to justify it and say, well, you know, if I was caught in this situation, would it be right? I don't have to justify any of it. I can see that it aligns with the nature of God. It functions within his purity, functions within his design, functions within her wisdom, within her clarity, within her compassion, within his love. And in that aspect, it's a knowing with a clarity, and I find myself engaged in it. When I hear other people describe how they listen for God, it is in a different way, because what I just described to you was how it came to me in a moment of need, and God expressed God's self for me to know. I wasn't listening. I was living. I was doing stuff, and I was seeking God while doing these things. But there is a practice of shifting out of this living experience, this unceasing awareness of prayer, and moving to a state of active listening. And I believe one of the things, if we come back to my opinion, that we have to do first is let go of all of our desires. Many people come to prayer, oh God, I want this. Oh God, I would like that. Oh God, I would like to see this happen. What can I do to make this happen? And we're forming a construct for the prayer. And we're praying it. We do not spend the time after we pray to meditate and listen. And I know you've probably heard this statement before, but prayer is speaking to God. Meditation is listening for God. What happens is everybody barks the prayer out there and they think it's a worthy prayer. And whether they get a response of clarity or not, they're going to act on it. And they're going to act on it to do it because they think it is worthy. And they don't allow themselves that practiced awareness of listening, meditative awareness, whether it takes 1 breath, 7 breaths, 9 breaths, or 21 breaths, or an hour of centering in upon the presence of God. The answer may be no answer, but you will have clarity that the no answer is the answer. You may get a specific direction that, well, now's not the time, but it is in order and it will come into place. Or you may get, nope, this is to be set aside completely. But it will come in the sense of a knowing in my observation.
I get a sense it takes practice, it takes stillness, going within to do that. And, I'm just coming back to a practical, mundane description I heard once. And it was described as the gap theory. On the one side, you have an impulse, some experience, somebody says something to you, something is surfacing. And then on the other side, you have the response, and in between is the space. And if we can make that space larger, and I look at it as being still and going within, then we can influence the response. So that space in between is, to me, is kind of like God space. It's that realm where we can grow and understand and gain that clarity that you're describing. Stillness. There is a thing, Leonard Bernstein had a saying here, stillness is our most intense mode of action. It's almost oxymoron. I mean, it's a mode of action, right? And he says, it is in our moments of deep quiet that is born every idea, emotion, and drive, which we eventually honor with the name of action. So this is, again, a human construct, right? This is a human saying, which is very logical. But you're talking about an awareness that's there without having to do anything, right? So that's what I'm struggling with, is like, how can I learn this active listening?
In that respect, one of the things that, like you even mentioned earlier, that people are looking from a Christian standpoint to how to just deepen their spiritual connection or deepen their ability to listen. And whether it's Buddhist, Taoist, Hindu, Christian, Muslim, whatever, the meditative practice is one of the keys. But if you've noticed, like when I surrender into prayer, I get taken into many languages. This is something I was instructed to when I was younger, to actually invite that gift in. And I'm saying people have to, they must speak tongue. No. What I found in it is I don't form the tongues. And I don't know if you've seen the scientific studies, but when somebody surrenders into prayer of tongues, the frontal lobe goes quiet. When you and I are just talking right now, it is firing constantly. It is moving constantly. They're seeing active, but the minute the tongues come in, that goes totally silent. There is nothing happening there. It is governed as God overtakes the vocal center of your being. So what's happened is I've had to, over these years, now 20 plus years of walking this ground of allowing God to overtake my tongue, like you said, it becomes a practiced awareness. Becoming practiced in surrendering every aspect of my being, whether it's the silence of the moment or the use of my tongue to God, then I listen as the prayer comes forward. Now I'm listening from within not the frontal lobe of the mind, but if you want to go to the physical aspect of it, I'm listening from within the depths of the mind to understand what is it God is conveying through my tongue right now. Because again, I'm not forming the prayer. But what I hear is a blessed prayer in the resultive nature, not, oh my God, please help me. It is, God, thank you that you have positioned me to move through this in grace. It's not, oh my God, I want to see this happen. It's Yahweh, thank you that if you're wisdom is moving me in this direction. I will know your presence to be guided step by step. So the prayer that forms is one that becomes a living prayer to manifest through me if I allow for the nature of that which is God to emerge from within me. So going back to the listening, even when I've prayed over children in hospitals, and like even a child that had a cancer tumor the size of a pool ball in his head, he says, you know, when you were speaking that funny language, I felt God. And then when you started speaking English, I couldn't. And that came from the mouth of a child and really made me recognize that this is not just something God is doing for Larry through Larry. This was something God was doing for the sake of others. So I had to submit myself even deeper to let it happen and listen for God, even in the active sense that the tongue's coming forth. I'm listening. I'm listening. So it is a practiced process of awareness. And in that surrender into the quiet stillness that you speak of between the emotive sharing of somebody else, your emotive reaction, and the response to it, that quiet. One of the things that I feel is most important if we shift out of the internal listening of how the tongues may form to the observational listening, being God, when we come to that moment in between, there has to be a peaceful embracing of silence. Otherwise, your decisions, your actions will be formed from within the emotive state caused by the sharing. And we see that so much now within social media and everything. So if we can enter that state of, like, I love the way you said that, if we can extend that place of silence, we would find us shifting out of the emotive reaction, out of the emotive state, into the state of the divine, and become the measurable result in the action. You're on mute.
I always do that. That is fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating, because, you know, when you pray and you pray in tongues and we pray a lot together, I listen and don't understand in terms of words, you know, what you're saying, but I think there's an understanding, there is a greater understanding there. But I want to give an example that just came to mind. You helped my brother-in-law, remember, who had a bad bicycling accident. Yeah. He was in a coma for, I think it was 7 or 10 days. And I contacted you and said, can we pray for him? And you made a recording. And I gave that recording to my niece, who played it at the bedside continuously for, I don't know, an hour, over and over. Yeah. And all of a sudden, he had the first movement, he wiggled his toes, and yes, he didn't quite open his eyes yet, but it was a sign that they haven't seen in 7 days. So to me, this speaks to exactly what you said before, you know, that stillness, that he was in a state where he wouldn't analyze things that are being said to him.
Exactly.
But it was given to him, and he just, woke up eventually. That was a very powerful experience.
That's a huge one to measure for just a moment here, because this strikes a correlation between why people don't receive healing and why some do. What I've witnessed in this process is if I end up praying over an animal, I don't care whether it's wild or domestic, they instantly receive the prayer because they're not thinking it. They're just living in that silent awareness of the divine all the time. They don't know it consciously in their mind, but they are it. What I found in humans is the closer they are to what we describe as death, but I call birth into new life, the more they've had stripped away from them and the less they fight within the mind. Same way with a person in coma. They have no tactile or earthly communicative response available to them, so all they can do is receive. And in the receiving, they wake. Because he's not the first. There's been many I've been blessed to do that for, make the recordings, and they play it over them when they're in the coma, and boom, they wake up. And some it's instantaneous, and others it's over a course of 3 days or whatever it happens to be. But that, like you said, there was that turning moment where there was evidentiary result that something was happening in them related to the prayer. Now, in that case, somebody living consciousness and in a coma, there is still the thought process going on. They're thinking. So there's a time of when they need to come away from thought and become that prayer. They have to become the prayer. What's happening is for like you, me, or others, when we're fully wide awake and, oh, I'm fine, fantastic. Well, I'm just ignoring the fact that there's spiritual depression going on and I'm just happy, hunky-dory. And we're not relinquishing, we're thinking it through. And we've taken ourselves out of that opening of that silent moment to become the living prayer. We haven't allowed for it. And what happens is we start to think ourselves away from the living prayer that's extended to us. So what's been offered to us in the living prayer that God is extending maybe through my tongue or through your tongue for the sake of others, whether you're marrying people or whatever, if you're extending a blessing to them, you've extended to it, you've offered it, and now what are they doing in that moment between it manifesting? Spoken, silence, receptiveness, or overthinking it and taking it away, and it becomes something different. Now it's no longer the extended prayer, it becomes this multifaceted, confusing thing that they don't understand anymore, but they did back here, because they haven't allowed for that peaceful journey of expression to let divinity move them in a way that brings measurable result.
What I'm hearing is, we tend to make a difference between ordinary life and divinity. But I think our spiritual experiences or our listening experiences lie in the ordinary life.
Exactly.
So
Agreed.
if you're listening to a waterfall or to the birds, that's part of the listening experience. That's part of God talking to us, right?
Exactly.
So
There's even people that have been blessed to experience listening in the wilderness, and they're drawn and heard from within the trees. And I'm not trying to get off into situations people don't understand, but there is a reality. God's life force moves through all aspects of blessing. If we can surrender and listen, we can become that which is God, to understand what God is conveying to us by those things that surround us.
So to give people, and we're going to slowly wrap it up because we could go on for hours.
Yes.
Good, it's so interesting. But let's see if we can come up, or you, Larry, can come up with a 2-3 step of a way of people helping them become still and become better listeners, in the broader sense. What would be a good way to practice that day in and day out?
Well, we've shared this before because it comes from so many different angles, but the reality is you must surrender first unto the conscious awareness of Creator, Source, God. There has to be a return to that first. And I've shared that through the meditation within the book on the covenant of love, that we would draw through the cosmos in releasing all distraction, all things that surround us, all instruction that we've been given, to seek the one awareness of seek Yahweh first, seek God first, seek Source first, seek Creator first. And there has to be an authorship to all creation. There's got to be a beginning point. That is where you want to return to first in that practice of what is this going to become? How am I going to seek to listen? From within the listening of that returning to Source first, that should come in a single breath. I have an intention to seek Creator. And in that, all of a sudden, 10,000 thoughts are going on in my head. We sit and quietly breathe and relinquish the thoughts directly to Yahweh, Creator, Source. We relinquish each thought, peeling each one away, trusting that by the time I come out of this place of silence, it's all going to be fine. Nothing's going to change in the next 7 minutes for these. Let's say I have 100 thoughts rattling around in my brain. I can't change anything in the next 7 minutes about those 100 thoughts, but I can relinquish them to Creator. I can give them over to God. I can allow God to take them from me so that I'm not managing them in my head. And I become centered on the one awareness, Abun, the living breath of God within me. So I just surrender. You might find that all of a sudden a whole block of 10 or 15 or 20 will go out of your head because you're breathing, centering in upon the presence of God. You're doing the simple breath in through the nose, soft and gentle. Then you exhale and relinquish thoughts with that exhale. As you peel down through these 100, you find yourself 3 breaths into it, or 5 breaths into it, or 7 breaths into it, and you're finding silence. You, as a practitioner, have to be comfortable in the silence. Many people are so accustomed to having the 100 thoughts rattling around in the brain, the minute you take those away, something's wrong because the 100 thoughts aren't there. You have to know that it is okay to be that which is God Creator, knowing the blessed result without consideration of thought. Center in on that silence, center in on that peace, and don't be discouraged if more thoughts come in. Breathe and relinquish them. And then possibly consider that you might find that at 17 or 20 or 21 breaths into it, all of a sudden you feel rising within you a desire to speak the name of God. Yahweh, Yahshua, Abun. And you may find that a gentle, quiet expression of these names over and over again, you'll move back into a state of silence and you'll find that there is no thought within your mind. Then a sense of clarity will come in. Then you may find within those 100 thoughts, there were 5, 7, or 9 that were prevalent and important in order to move you toward the living prayer of God within you. Your life in blessing, your life in abundance. You will find 5, 7, or 9 out of the 100 that you will be compelled with absolute clarity that they align with the divine, and now you move forward into those 5, 7, or 9 thoughts. Actively pursuant of God, not the measurable result of the gift. So you're pursuing the living prayer of God's presence. You become the living prayer of God's presence. That is the blessed result of those things God has in place for you, not necessarily the single desire you approached with. So the single desire is relinquished. The 100 thoughts are relinquished. The breath of God is realized, and you become that breath of God. And it is a quiet, practiced awareness. And we've talked about this before. You might be used to meditating 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 140 minutes. But the reality is all that practice of meditation is to get you to that ability where you can touch upon that state you found at 90 minutes in a single breath. And all of a sudden, that time that you say extend becomes a certain length of time. That length of time is now available in a single breath. And that's what people don't understand, is this isn't about increase. Well, how am I going to find time to meditate? You find time to meditate so that it buys you back time where you need not meditate. You become so practiced in touching upon the presence of God, time has no meaning. And a single breath becomes the clearing of 100 thoughts, the clearing of personal desire, the perfect centering upon creation, and moving to the blessed result of the prayer comes in a single breath. But yes, like you said, for people that are searching this, there does need to become a practiced awareness of doing this. And the quicker you can let go of thought and how you have to structure this by a certain religious process. And I exactly have to do this based upon theological observation or doctrinal review. No. Single breath, touch the presence of God, relinquish thoughts.
We humans have become creature of habit, and I think we always think we have things that must be done. You know, we need to be something specific. You know, that's how we have created our lives. And I think what I get out of this message is by returning to the breath, that single breath, we can create a stillness and a space for God in our life.
Not create. The stillness is already present.
Reveal it.
You are not the creator. You are not a co-creator. You are a co-revealer. You're a partner in the revealing of that which Creator has already established. Creator has already established that living state of peaceful silence always. It is your role to discover that state no matter what the din of the earth is, no matter what the chaos. If you see protests unfolding, you become the peace within the midst, and you act not upon violence, you act not upon aggression, you act not upon a judgment, you become the peace in the midst. Just as Yeshua, when we shared this before, when Yeshua was sitting upon the rock and they brought forward that woman to cast stones and take her life for adultery. And he quietly sat there and took up the stick. And he said, let the one in the crowd who has not sinned cast the first stone. Then he sat there quietly in the midst of the protest, in the midst of the rabble, in the midst of the desire to kill, hate, judgment, all these things. And he sat down and he quietly scribed what he was witnessing spiritually within them upon the stone. He scribed it into the sand and then would swipe it away. So if he saw hatred, if he saw judgment, if he saw adultery, he wrote it in Sanskrit in the sand and swiped it away. So it is our opportunity to join that state of peace that God has already established, to join that state of silence that God has already held in state throughout all creation, and become one with that. And then remember that each of us are individual. This is not going to come from some doctrinal thesis or some theological process. It's going to become from within you through personal discovery and your surrendering first unto Creator, Source, Redeemer.
So our call to action for this week, or my call to action that I encourage everyone else, is to reveal, discover that stillness within that already exists.
Exactly.
And it will bring great blessings. So I think with this, we wrap it up. Larry, what do you think?
I agree. Yes.
All right, everyone, please.
I mean, all of a sudden you could just take off and go.
I know, we could start all over. But I want to just point out, like we always do, go to gracehealing.org, our website, or gracehealing.video, the YouTube channel that we have, where you can view several other videos on the same and different topics. And we will be back next week again.
Most definitely.
All right, Larry, thanks for your time. Blessings. See you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.